Hello and welcome to the LLG Grapevine podcast. You're listening to Helen McGrath, Head of Public Affairs, and Dennis Hall, LLG Bulletin Editor.
Hello, everyone.
Here we go again, Dennis. Monday does come around fast. Well, now, last week the High Court held that the routine housing of unaccompanied child asylum seekers in hotels was unlawful. Nadine Dorries came under pressure from Flitwick Town Council, and the news that the flexibility for pubs to sell takeaway pints brought in under COVID rules will end by the 30th of September. Dennis and I take a trawl through the local government news you should be paying attention to. Dennis.
Thanks, Helen. On the 19th of July, the first module of the COVID inquiry came to a close, with final submissions being made. Robin Allen KC summed up both for the LGA and the Welsh LGA, making a number of critical observations upon what the inquiry had heard on the issue of preparedness for the pandemic. Here's more. Councils simply do not understand the evidence given by former Health Secretary Matt Hancock, Mr. Allen told the inquiry on the 19th of July. Calling into question Hancock's evidence, he said, Hancock's former department had far more levers to pull in order to oversee social care provision than he had suggested in his own evidence. Last month, Mr. Hancock told Inquiry Chair Baroness Heather Hallett that adult social care was in a terrible state of pandemic preparedness, with the government lacking basic knowledge, including how many care homes were in the UK at the time when the coronavirus struck. Hancock said that by January 2020, his department, which had responsibility to ensure adequate oversight for planning and preparedness for a health emergency, did not have a plan in place to identify how many people were in the care sector. But the MP said the responsibility for ensuring pandemic preparedness in the sector formally fell to local authorities, and while he was accountable through his role as Secretary of State for Health and Social Care, he didn't have the levers to act. Now, on the final day of the Module 1 hearings, which are focused on resilience and preparedness, Robin Allen KC said that the LGA profoundly disagreed with Mr. Hancock's evidence and comments. During closing statements, Mr. Allen told the inquiry, the LGA simply do not understand the evidence of former Secretary of State for Health, Mr. Hancock, who stated that only 2 councils had plans for pandemic flu, a suggestion they do not believe to be accurate at all. Mr. Allen said, and similarly, they believe the department has far more levers to enable it to understand, oversee, and to shape social care provision than his evidence actually suggested. To find out the extent of adult social care provision, all Mr. Hancock had to do was to speak to the Care Quality Commission, with which providers must be registered, or with directors of adult social care services who commission care services. In future, Mr. Allen said local government should be at the core of all future resilience planning and must be treated as a trusted and equal partner by central government. He added, local government preparedness had been impacted by austerity, but this cannot be allowed to occur again. Now, these submissions were made just days after damning evidence from public health officials about the lack of communication from central government. Professor Jim McManus, president of the Association of Directors of Public Health, said communication from central government had been lacking. These key officials learned what the government was doing from TV reports. Communication was minimal, not optimal. Baroness Hallett said that the report for Module 1 will be published as soon as possible, with an aim for early summer 2024. Module 2 hearings, which will focus on core UK decision-making and political governance, are due to start on the 3rd of October.
Joanna Avery has said that the government's commitment to development and regeneration in and around existing town and city centres is also guiding its consideration of responses to the consultation on updating the National Planning Policy Framework. She advises that the government wants to make it easier to progress such developments, and to that end, it is clear that development should proceed on sites that are adopted in a local plan with full input from the local community, unless there's strong reasons why it cannot. Local councils should be open and pragmatic in agreeing changes to developments where conditions mean that the original plan may no longer be viable, rather than losing the development wholesale or seeing development mothballed. Better use should be made of small pockets of brownfield land by being more permissive, so more homes can be built more quickly where and how it makes sense, giving more confidence and certainty to SME builders. Now, in respect to planning fees, Averley said that the draft regulations to introduce a national fee increase of 35% for major applications and 25% for all other applications was laid on the 20th of July. And further, that the Planning Skills Delivery Fund has also launched and that local planning authorities can now apply for funding, which can be used to hire additional planning officers and invest in other resources to help clear planning backlogs. Applications are open until the 11th of September, with each authority able to bid for up to £100,000. Dennis, what's next?
Government has finally responded, and after much delay, to the Committee on Standards in Public Life and to other bodies by publishing its response to 3 reports, all concerned with strengthening ethics and integrity in central government. Here's the reply from Committee on Standards Chair, Lord Evans. Lord Evans welcomed the government's consideration of and detailed response to their 2021 Upholding Standards in Public Life report and the recommendations, as well as those made by the Boardman report and by the report from the Public Administration and Constitutional Affairs Committee in Parliament. He said they're pleased that the government have decided to accept a number of recommendations, particularly around greater transparency of government departmental returns and the government's business appointment rules, including for the first time a deed that will legally commit ministers to follow those rules and enable sanctions for those that don't. Lord Evans said that they also welcomed the greater transparency around direct ministerial appointments and agreement to the recommendation that appointments of non-executive directors of government departments will in future be regulated under the Governance Code for Public Appointments. Lord Evans said that these steps are steps in the right direction. He said that the Standards Committee also had made a number of other important recommendations about the powers of the independent advisor on ministers' interests, the status of the ministerial code, and placing ethics bodies on a statutory footing. But regrettably, the government has not accepted these particular recommendations. But overall, progress has been made, but it should not be the end of the story, Lord Evans said. We would encourage the government to keep the remainder of their recommendations under review. The rules that govern public office do require constant attention, Helen.
Now, did you have sight of a letter from DLUC regarding digital imprints on electioneering documents? Well, let's look at what digital imprint means in this regard first. The government has laid draft guidance before Parliament that sets out how those posting political adverts online should identify themselves to help campaigners comply with the new digital imprint and transparency rules set out in the Elections Act 2022. Defined nicely in the local government lawyer, rules in the Act require certain digital campaign material aimed at the UK public to include details to show who is responsible for publishing it. These details are known as an imprint. All material will need an imprint, but if it's not classified as political material because payment has been made for the material to be published as an advert, then it's classified as organic material. Organic material must have an imprint if it is election material, referendum material, or recall petition material, and it is published by or on behalf of a relevant entity such as a candidate or registered political party. The draft guidance says the address must be a postal address where the promoter can be contacted. Now, councillors can use their council address if they do not want to use their personal address. Now, you might be wondering about the code of recommended practices on local authority publicity here, especially if communications are not clear when they come in as to what exactly they relate to. But we're not so concerned about that here. There are other concerns as well, big concerns as to the knock-on effect. LLG are alive to this issue, and we're working with a number of other stakeholders to examine the issue and raise it with government. We'll keep you posted on developments and also let you know what those big concerns might be, depending on how far we get. Dennis, what's your last item today?
Helen, the Social Housing Regulation Act received royal assent last week, with the Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities claiming that the legislation will strengthen powers to tackle failing social landlords, and tenants living in unsafe homes will be better supported by the housing regulator. Here's some of the detail on this. Here's a quick summary of the key features of the new Act. First, it strengthens the regulator of social housing to carry out regular inspections of the largest social housing providers and the power to issue unlimited fines to rogue social landlords. Second, it gives additional powers to the Housing Ombudsman to publish best practice guidance to landlords following investigations into tenant complaints. Next, it provides powers to set strict time limits for social landlords to address hazards such as damp and mould. Next, it introduces new qualification requirements for social housing managers. And finally, it introduces stronger economic powers to follow inappropriate money transactions outside of the sector. DeLuc revealed that new enforcement powers will be made available to tackle failing social housing landlords who are not pulling their weight in taking swift action to address damp, cold, and unsafe homes. Alongside powers to issue unlimited fines, a stronger regulator will have greater authority to flush out rogue social landlords with the ability to enter properties with only 48 hours notice and make emergency repairs where there is a serious risk to tenants, the department said. The Act also makes changes to what activities the regulator can charge landlord fees for, ensuring it has the resources it needs to do its job. The department went on to say, "We expect future changes to fee charging will see all social housing providers, both private registered providers and local authority landlords, paying for regulation costs. This will include new consumer standards as well as other costs, such as investigating when things go wrong," said the spokesperson for DeLuc. The government has also committed to introducing AWAB's law, where all landlords must fix reported health and safety hazards within a strict time frame. This follows the death of a 2-year-old in December 2020 due to damp and mould in his Rochdale flat. DeLuc have said the Social Housing Act is the latest step in addressing systemic issues identified following the Grenfell Tower tragedy, not just on the safety and quality of social housing, but about how tenants are treated by their landlords. Helen.
Now, the Ministry of Justice announced last week its commitment, following consultation, to fully integrate mediation as a key step in the court process for small civil claims valued up to £10,000, starting with specified money claims, which make up about 80% of all small claims. Over 180,000 parties will be referred automatically to a free hour-long telephone session with a professional mediator provided by HM courts and tribunal services before their case can be progressed to a hearing. It's estimated that greater use of mediation could positively impact up to 92,000 cases per year. This could free up to 5,000 sitting days a year, providing, the government says, a substantial boost to court capacity and helping the government to reduce waiting time for the most complex cases. Justice Minister Lord Bellamy, KC, said, by integrating mediation for small civil claims, we will create valuable court capacity, freeing up time for judges and reducing pressures on the courts. In March of this year, the government announced plans to mandate mediation for separating families to protect children from witnessing disputes in the family courts, with an ambition to help 2,000 separating families. The scheme's now distributed almost 20,000 mediation vouchers, 10 times the original goal. An analysis of the first 7,200 scheme users shows that 69% reached a full or partial agreement without needing to go on to court. So let's see if this new scheme delivers as well, and if it's causing you difficulties in your litigation, which might not have been foreseen by the government. Do let us know on the forum. And on that note, you can read more on the items discussed today and many more besides by going to Bulletin number 29, available on the LLG website now. We're taking a couple of short summer breaks, so join us for the next Grapevine, which will be available during the week beginning the 14th of August. So until then, it's goodbye from me.
And from me too.